What's good, YouTube? Cardfight King here. Today, guys, I wanted to bring you my Ravemon deck profile for the BT13 format. This deck is a pretty cheap and easy deck to build, mostly because the base rarity, the prices are not that much. You're not really spending too much on it, and probably maybe 20 bucks to finish the whole deck, really. And then easy to build because really you're staying within archetype with it, the whole kind of like hand destruction type of thing that it does. So that's kind of what you're doing, just to stay within archetype. Not too many ways you're going to really explore with this deck, as far as creativity goes, just because this deck really kind of has like a strategy and it needs to stick to that in order for the deck to actually be effective. But I wanted to go ahead and get into the deck. This deck has been as far as like meta overview overall and things like that, this deck definitely has not met my expectations from what I originally thought, kind of like going into the format. It had some hype from the Japanese format, but I think this deck definitely has fallen short, and there's just a few things that I'm going to talk about in the video as to why I just think that this deck could have had could be improved, but I think its main mechanic really kind of holds it back a little bit, and I'll tell you why. Pinamon, so most of this deck is being deleted outside of battle. Okay, so like outside of battle is what activates pretty much all of your effects except for the Sukaimon. And Pinamon lets you gain a memory if the stack is deleted outside of battle, which is good. Having that memory control is something Purple is known for. We got 4 copies of the Falcomon from the EX4. We got 4 copies of the Falcomon from, this is the Falcomon from BT13, and then we got 4 Sukaimons. You guys know what Sukaimon is. It's been in the game since the first set, or BT 1.5, whatever it is. But basically what this Falcomon is your search Falcomon. They both have the same inheritable where if you delete outside of battle, your opponent discards a card from their hand. But this one gives retaliation, so you can combo this with the BT13 Crowmon and the BT13 Ravemon, where you can bring this Falcomon out and give your blocker Peckmon retaliation, or you can drop this out to give one of your Ravemon retaliation, and then that in effect will discourage your opponent from actually wanting to swing into, your Ravemons and things like that. And the Sukaimon deletes gaining memory. But they both have the same inheritable. So this is your ideal target because you'd rather get your search out and keep getting your pieces. This one is, the one that you want to put in the raising area for your main Digivolve target. Going into the level 4s, the 4s are again pretty simple. 4 copies of the EX4 Peckmon and 4 copies of the Peckmon from BT13. So this Peckmon here lets you play a Keen and Krier on Digivolve, and then your opponent discards a card if it's deleted outside of battle. This one's just blocker and has the same inheritable to make your opponent discard a card outside of if deleted outside of battle. The common theme is their inheritables, deleting cards outside of battle, or having them delete outside battle and then the opponent discarding a card. The problem is your opponent gets to choose what they discard. If you were able to do something like Mirage Galgamon Burst Mode, where your opponent randomly chooses, selects a card, and then you choose a card out of the random selection from their hand to discard, I think that would be a lot better, because then you can really mess up their plays by, maybe randomly selecting the card that you want to get rid of, whatever it is. But the fact that your opponent gets to choose means that they can selectively choose what does and does not go into their drop zone, so that they can still have their play and things like that. So that's where I think the big flaw in the mechanic is that your opponent gets to choose. So you're putting power in your opponent's hand instead of you not letting them have choice over what they filter out of their hand and not. And I just think putting power, I've never really liked giving your opponent the ability to choose something that would be a detriment to them, rather than me being able to control what would be a detriment to them. But that's my pet peeve. That's my issue with the kind of like overall skill or hand destruction mechanic of this deck. 4 copies of the EX4 Crowmon, 4 copies of the BT13 Crowmon. These 2 cards are pretty different. The EX4 Crowmon, it lets you digivolve from the hand, but that's only if you have a purple Tamer. And its inheritable lets you delete a level 5 or lower when it's deleted outside of battle. This Crowmon lets you digivolve into a Ravemon from the drop zone. If you have a Tamer. So this one doesn't need a specifically colored Tamer. This one does. And that is kind of weird to me. If they made him not need a specific color Tamer, I think Analog Youth would be, you know, would have been a lot better. But it's like, oh, I can't just have an Analog Youth and have him to digivolve from the hand. Kind of sucks there. Their inheritables are different too. Obviously, this one lets you delete. This one lets you play a level 4 lower purple Digimon card from your trash without paying the cost. Now, I do like this one. I think this Crowmon's probably the best because you can play a level 4 lower Digimon from the trash without paying the cost, and I think that really helps with board recursion and things like that, because yes, cycling one Ravemon to the board can be nice to a degree, but you're not really putting any threatening board presence out. You're not putting out more attacks on your opponent. This card allows you to do that. Plus, you can put a blocker just in case you need to have some way to protect yourself for the next turn as well. This one's ability is nice to delete level 5 or lower, but if they only have like a level 6 or they have something in the raising, whatever it is, then this ability fizzles. This one's not going to fizzle. This one will fizzle, because this one you can just call a card from your stack and you're good to go. Then for the Ravemons, I'm playing 3 copies of the EX4 Ravemon and 3 copies of the BT13 Ravemon. I was going with 4 and 2, but I bumped this Ravemon up because the 4-cost Evo to pass turn is actually fine in a lot of sense, because you can gain your turn back. But there are times where it's like, you know, you're choked at 1 or 2 memory. You digivolve into this Ravemon. This Ravemon is just sitting there. This one actually will be able to delete and get his effect off. The other thing is that this one is better in the early game for building up your board advantage. You could probably swing 12k. Yeah, it's risky in a way, but you can swing 12k or swing over something. Then you can play like another card to the board, increase your board presence, pass turn. Then this card will die, and then you get his effect off if you have a bird or avian, because the BT13 one will let you play. You know, you'll let you get the Ravemon back out at the end of the turn if you have a bird or avian, but his on deletion lets you play a Falcomon or a Keenan Krier. So there's a Keenan Krier in your trash that you discarded off like an Analog Boy or whatever it is. You can get your Tamer out to the board. This one will let you get out a Falcomon so that you can get a search off if you need to, or you can get the BT13 Falcomon off because you had this Crowmon in the stack, and then you're able to give your blocker something. So this card is just really versatile in a lot of different phases in the game. Never really bad. This one here is an interesting one. It does have jamming, so this is the one where you really just want to keep throwing this into your opponent's stack because it has jamming. The other thing is that, you know, his on deletion, if you have 8 or more cards in your hand, your opponent has 8 or more cards in their hand, they choose one to discard. If they have 7 or less, they add the top card of their security to their hand. Now, again, I have a problem with it because you're not really in control of what they do. Your opponent adding the top card of their security to your hand, that's fine. So it's kind of like you're taking away 2 security without them doing anything, but you're still putting a card from their security in their hand. That may or may not screw you. Again, it's variables out of your control. The other thing is, you know, your opponent gets to choose what they discard. Again, I would rather randomly choose a card from their hand to discard and have a better chance at screwing up whatever the next play is, instead of your opponent saying, oh, well, I have 3 level 6s in my hand. I don't really need that many. Here's a level 6 to the drop zone. That could, yes, set up your Ravemon burst mode, but again, you not being in control of what they discard can be a detriment to you. And speaking of burst mode, we got 3 copies of Ravemon burst mode. Sometimes I feel like playing a 4th because this is while this may not be the best burst mode, this deck specifically wants to see its burst mode. So when you burst Digivolve, you bounce a Keenan Krier back, and then you get to Digivolve into him for free. On Digivolving, though, you get to look at your opponent. Now, this is the one that I think this is the best ability of it. You get to look at your opponent's hand, and then you get to then you get to trash a card in the hand. So you can look at their hand, and this one lets you look at the hand to do it. Now, I've been talking about the other ones where it's like, oh, they can, you know, randomly do it. Right. The other ones are not, should not be as powerful as your burst mode, correct. I wish I could just randomly discard from the hand, and then this one allows me to look at their hand and discard. So this one gives you the most power over what you're doing to their hands, which is great. And then if they have 7 or fewer cards in their hand, they get to add the top card of the security stack to their hand. Again, while that is good and that does take their security down, it's basically like non-damaging them. You're taking a known card out of their hand but putting an unknown card into their hand, and by putting an unknown card into their hand, that it may or may not screw them over. Again, you're coin flipping with that type of ability, right? But you still get to look at your opponent's hand, anticipate that knowledge. When you get to look at your opponent's hand, that type of knowledge is always good. In any game, that's always good when you get to know what your opponent is holding. The other ability, though, is a little bit awkward. So when attacking, you return one of their Digimon cards to the bottom of their deck, and then you can delete all of their Digimon on the board that share the same name as that Digimon. Now, again, this one's a little awkward because if you're trying to get rid of a Shine Greymon, but they don't have any Shine Greymons in their trash, then, you know, that... And then it's like, oh, well, I guess I'm just not deleting you. You can say, sure, you can pluck the Shine Greymon out of their hand, right? But if they don't have a Shine Greymon in their hand, then that's not working. If they didn't discard one earlier for one of the abilities, if they did not, and if you did not see another copy of Shine Greymon in their hand for his when attacking, then his when attacking kind of fizzles, and you just maybe just throw a card to the bottom of their deck if you so choose to. So it's an ability that can be very hit or miss depending on how the game has gone. But again, if your opponent knows what they're playing against and kind of like knows how to play around this ability, they can do their best to just play around that ability in a sense. But it's still a card that you want to see. Never really want to hard Digivolve into burst mode. Really, you want to just Digivolve into him and then have him come back, because you still want to get his kind of like his on deletion skill if your opponent deletes him. But mostly for BT13. So the BT13 Ravemon, after you burst mode, at the end of your turn, your burst mode goes away, and then it's still the end of your turn. It's still the end of your turn. Let's say if you did have a stack in here, then you can, if you did have a bird or avian in the stack in here, you can delete him for the end of turn and get the ability off. If you don't, that's fine. He's going to be sitting there, and if your opponent does delete him, then you get to gain some type of board presence and then cycle and continue. But that's what it is for burst mode. For option cards, I'm running 2 Amino Ohabari. I'm running 2 Purple Memory Boost and 1 Calling from the Darkness. Calling from the Darkness, again, is just to get 2 purple cards in your hand, use your drop zone as a toolbox. Purple Memory Boost to help with finding certain pieces, because again, in this deck, you really need to Digivolve up and see your line. And then in the Amino Habari, I really want to run 3. I was running 3. We were 3 or 4 last format, but I cut it down to 2 just for space in the deck. But I really want to run 3, and I probably could just change it up and run 3, whatever. But what it does is that by deleting one of your Digimon, you delete one of your opponent's Digimon with the same level or lower than the one you deleted. And then if that Digimon that was deleted was a Ravemon, then you get to bring a Ravemon back from the trash. And the cool thing about having the 2 different Ravemons is that you get to decide, like, even when they get deleted by their own ability, you could just bring back a Ravemon. So it's like, all right, well, I have field presence. I don't really need to get field presence. I don't need to get a Keenan Creator. Let's bring out the jamming one and let's just keep pounding at their security. If you need to build field presence, if you need something like that, then you go ahead and bring this one out. So they're on deletions, plus this card here will let you kind of like toolbox like which Ravemon you do want to bring out. But again, hitting this in security, you delete your opponent's Digimon with the lowest level, can be really good as well, because if your opponent like has Marcuses out and just a Shine Greymon and they hit this card, well, the Marcuses don't have a level, so you can delete. So you're gonna be, but they are treated as Digimon, but they don't have a level. And if Shine is the only one on the board, then you go ahead and delete the Shine Greymon. So that's just an example of like kind of what you do. So that's really why I want to play more copies of that, just because I want to have a more threatening security. And again, I may end up doing that. You could cut a memory boost, make a cut, probably probably somewhere. I don't know about in the deck at all, but maybe in the Tamer lineup, make a cut there. Because really, again, you're sticking to your main archetype in this deck. for the Tamers, 3 copies of Keenan Krier from the EX4, 3 copies of Keenan Krier from BT13, and 2 Analog Youth. Here is where, like, maybe for another Ameno Obari, I'd probably cut this Keenan Krier here for another Ameno Obari. But I want to just kind of go with this lineup just for now, and then we'll, after more testing, we'll play around with that. This is the most important Tamer to have on the board. At 4 copies, he kind of does clog, and there are builds that do run 4 copies of him because you want to see him early and often. He's your memory setter, and then when your Digimon is deleted, if you have a purple Digimon was deleted, or a bird or avian, you get to draw a card. You get to tap him, draw a card, and then if it was deleted by an effect, you get to gain him. You get to gain a memory. So this one is really good because it works in all phases of the game. It's just really strong. The new Keenan Krier, I kind of overvalued what this new Keenan Krier brought to the table, and the reason why I was running 6 was because I wanted to have a bigger chance of having my Crowmon from EX4 actually go off, because I need purple Tamers. But again, I'm thinking about just sacrificing that for a more destructive option card that would help me out with clearing off opponents' boards and things like that. But what this Keenan Krier does is that on play, your opponent chooses to trash a Digimon, basically a Tamer card or an option card in the hand. If they don't, then you get to draw one and gain a memory. Again, you're putting it in your opponent's hands of whether or not they want to, trash an option card or trash a Tamer card. If they don't, great. If they do, then yeah, that kind of sucks. Does that let you read into what they have in their hand? Probably. If they don't have anything to discard, okay, we get a free draw one and gain a memory. If they do have something to trash, then that's fine. We did get something out of their hand, but how worth is it? Whatever. The other ability is that during your opponent's turn, when an effect plays a Digimon to the board, you can tap it to gain a memory. So this is kind of like one of the reasons why I kept it in S3, is because if this card's on the board and your opponent's like playing a card from their drop zone, playing a card from their hand, and doing it like through an effect, you can tap this and just gain a memory. So you can kind of treat it like it's a kind of like what Purple Mimi is. If they activate an option card, tap it to gain a memory. Kari, if you lose a security, tap it, gain a memory, stuff like that. So this is kind of like that same kind of deal, but only when your opponent plays a card through an effect. And then the 2 Analog Youth is just there because you do actually use his full ability in this deck. When you delete your entire stack, you can tap this. You tap this to gain a memory and hatch an egg. This one definitely goes off a lot more often in this deck. Again, you want to prioritize this Keenan. This Keenan is decent, but is not as great as I originally thought it was. But you still get to get some benefits off of it. And then the Analog Youth is good. It's not great, but it's good. It's a very good card, and I would not play less than 2 copies of it in the deck. It's just a card that can definitely go off often. But that's the deck profile, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Ravemon is definitely a fun deck to play. I think you'll have a lot of fun playing it. Just just understand that there are, design flaws in a way. Maybe it may not be a flaw, whatever it is, but you are putting the power of discarding into your opponent's hands rather than you randomly selecting it. Burst mode is the only one that you can look at their hand and discard, even though you're still potentially adding a random value card to their hand if they have security to add to their hand. But that's been Deck Profile. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you guys later. Peace out.